We also wanted to make sure we keep an eye on other news stories that are happening, other things going on across, well, not just the country, but around the world. But in this case, right next door in Canada, we had followed very closely the situation of the trucker convoy protest, which has now essentially been broken up by Trudeau sending in the police to arrest, shut down, and also seize the bank accounts of anybody involved in this. Well, Trudeau, now that it's over for the time being, has said the following about the state of emergency that his own parliament, unfortunately, did ratify, because there's a lot of socialists who like the use of authoritarian powers in Canada, certainly in the Canadian government. Here's what Trudeau said. Play it.
Today, after careful consideration, we're ready to confirm that the situation is no longer an emergency. Therefore, the federal government will be ending the use of the Emergencies Act. We are confident that existing laws and bylaws are now sufficient to keep people safe.
Clay, this guy, look, I mean, obviously, Putin's going full-scale invasion right now in a country that was not threatening him, and this is an aggressive invasion over there. But the Trudeau tyranny over here about COVID is something that I think it's hard for people to forget about, or I hope they won't forget about it, because it just shows you that there was so much of what we've all been put through for 2 years here that was about politics and power. It was not... Well, what they did to the truckers was not about keeping anyone safe from the virus. It wasn't about stopping the spread. It was about listen to us or else, peasants. And it's a reminder of why we need to defend our freedoms, even in times, most of all in times of emergency.
It was jarring to see Trudeau trying to condemn Putin when the acts that he undertook to bring those peaceful protesters to their knees and beyond, because they're going to continue to pursue them all over the place. And there was no need for it. That's what is going to be so jarring, is even though Canada lost its mind with COVID, there's a very strong chance that Canada is going to be eliminating masks, that they're going to be eliminating vaccine mandates, that everyone is going to be able to go back in some measure to normal, which is exactly what all the protesters were pursuing. And we'll see what happens with potentially the truckers that are talking about gathering next week in Washington, D.C. I do genuinely wonder how, if there was a trucker protest that emerged in Washington, D.C., how Joe Biden would handle it. They obviously have put the Capitol back wreathed in fencing, so that you can't get close to it, because they're going to try to sell the idea of this is January 6th all over again. And what I would say to the truckers out there is understand that if you are going to go to Washington, D.C., that is going to be the narrative that the media, to a large extent, is going to sell to a willing public, which is these truckers are 1 year later, basically January 6th, despots all over again, trying to shut down our government through their protest. Now, what's already interesting, Buck, and I'm sure you saw this, remember when the idea of calling in troops to help provide security was so unacceptable an opinion that when Tom Cotton, a sitting senator from Arkansas, wrote it on the New York Times op-ed page, they fired the editor for even allowing that opinion to be uttered? Well, they've already called in, I believe, 800 guardsmen to help prepare for what may or may not be a substantial number of truckers that are headed to D.C.
Yeah, protests and riots that are rooted in not just socialism, but really a virulent Marxism, that's fine. Western governments, according to our own media and the apparatus here, not supposed to do anything about that. Let that go. Let the people riot. Let them have their say when it's for BLM or whatever, Occupy Wall Street or any of these movements that are out there, Antifa. And yet, when you had a peaceful protest against vaccine mandates and really just the COVID tyranny that we've all been put through, and I am not forgetting, I'm not backing off 1 inch from the promises that we've made here on the show, Clay, to continue to make sure people focus on that going into the midterms, because what was done to us
consequences, they have
that's
to
right.
exist.
There must be accountability for this, because what they did was crazy. These people are out of their minds. I mean, you mentioned there are some tweets. Now, these aren't from Biden officials or anything, but people have tweets out there, and they don't look like they're trying to be funny, saying things like, it's really scary how many people are crowding indoors in Ukraine without masks on right now. I mean, there was a mass hysteria that the Democrat Party weaponized, but then really couldn't control. They weaponized it against Trump, but then they realized they couldn't turn it off, so they just went with it, and they liked the power that it gave them, so they doubled down on it. But this was a really dangerous time in the history of our country for what they did to basic freedoms and the viciousness with which Joe Biden divided our country. Look, I'm seeing a lot of it now. Clay, they're saying over Ukraine, now you must rally behind Biden. Really? The vaccine mandate, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Shut up, peasant, don't leave your home. If you don't get the shot, you're a monster who wants grandma to die. President, that's the guy I'm supposed to rally behind now because of a war that's 5,000 miles away? No thanks. No thanks. I'll wait till they get rid of all the mandates, including the mask one on planes. Thank you very much. I don't think so.
As well as criticizing the idea of it being unpatriotic to be criticizing the president, when the same people told us for 4 years, when they ripped Donald Trump to shreds for every single thing that he did, that was the height of patriotism, when they gave themselves all those journalism awards for democracy dying in darkness and all that shenanigans. And now when reasonable people are taking a step back and saying, hey, I don't think it's a coincidence that Putin didn't make a move at all while Donald Trump was in office, and then a little over a year after Joe Biden's in office, after the disaster of the summer that was Afghanistan, that now we have to worry not only about Ukraine, but as we started off the show talking about, Buck, the fear is also that we could be dealing with a legitimate issue in the Pacific with Taiwan and with China as well, that those twin pillars of combat that we have now between Russia and China are getting closer together, and they may well be allied against American interest in having dual-fronted invasions.